And I think we are live.
Hello.
Hello. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the session. I am Madalina Andrei, your host, former Global Mobility Coordinator, currently Provider Relationship Manager.
Hello.
Currently Provider Relationship Manager with expat.global, the first SaaS-enabled marketplace ecosystem in the global mobility sector. This is my second LinkedIn live event from Expat NEXUS series, a series which has as main goal to become a place where we can share best practices in our industry, learn from each other, and most importantly, grow together. Our topic today is actually a challenge, and that challenge is to see if we can squeeze 10 years of global mobility experience into 30 minutes. So global mobility industry 10 years after, and for this session, I have by my side my colleague. Yes, you heard that right, my colleague, but we'll get back to that a bit later. Marie Yuk. Surely many of you already know Marie, with over 10 years of experience in the global mobility industry, working with various large relocation management companies and household goods companies. Marie has been involved in a wide variety of activities in this industry, such as supply chain management, moving services, partnerships, corporate relocations, process improvements, change management, reporting, pricing, data analytics, and so many others. So for those of you watching us and being with us today, first of all, thank you very much for attending this session. Just drop by, say hello, and please feel free to address any questions you might have for Marie. In case we'll not be able to answer the questions you have in this half hour, definitely we'll be answering them afterwards in LinkedIn. Hello, Marie. It's lovely having you here today with me.
Thank you. And thank you for the great introduction as well. I feel like the list of things that I've been involved with was like never ending. And I also feel like 10 years makes me feel a bit older than I probably should.
But you're not.
But it's great to be here, and I appreciate obviously you hosting and making this happen, and anyone who's coming to listen in and get involved in the conversation.
Super. We can start then with a phrase which is much used these days, right? Digital nomad.
Yes.
I know that this is on your LinkedIn profile. And what exactly do you mean by this? How does this digital nomad phrase defines you? I know, for example, that you have experienced several roles during your life, like expat kid and expat professional. So please tell us more.
Absolutely. I mean, I started using the term digital nomad quite recently, actually, but I have been kind of living that nomadic lifestyle, as you may call it, since around November 2019. So actually just before the pandemic hit. But what it really means is about being able to work remotely, right? And really taking advantage of the technology that we have available for us to carry out my duties and not have to be location dependent, right? I don't have to be in a certain location to work or to even connect with my friends and family, right? We have so many tools out there now. And really, that's the underlying definition of digital nomad, right? Everyone thinks of digital nomads as these beach bums sitting with their laptops or cafes, but it's a lot more than that. When you actually look at the demographics of, some research data, it's often middle age and up, not the young people, because, you have to be able to sustain your lifestyle, and it's not often the cheapest lifestyle.
True.
I think that's a misconception because they think of backpackers and such, and they think of,
a bit of exotic, right?
Yeah. but really it's just the ability of working remotely and having the freedom to choose where you work from, really. You know, and in the last year I've been in various locations, but the underlining thing is I've always carried on working on a project. I worked on GMJ when I was totally kind of up in the air, living out of a suitcase. But it's an interesting lifestyle to have, for sure.
Yeah, meaning getting back to the roles that you had. I remember you telling me at some point that you had almost all the roles involved in this expatriation experience, let's call it. So
yes.
briefly...
So when I was sorry. So when I was 15, I actually moved to Ireland from Estonia. I'm from Estonia originally, and I moved to Ireland. So I was kind of like an expat teenager. Mad at my parents for uprooting my life at home,
doing that, yeah.
Yeah. So I can totally appreciate how difficult it can be for these families when they're relocating, right? Because they are uprooting their family's life, and I've been through that, and I know how hard it can be. Then I've also done the independent relocation of myself. When I turned 20, I moved to London, and that's kind of where my mobility journey began as well. And I've been on short-term assignments in Asia Pacific and Malaysia, and I've also done the long-term assignment of 2 years, which I did in North America and Canada. And now obviously transitioned from there to totally being kind of location independent, having more than one home, a home on each side of the world, really.
Was at any point, I mean, did you feel at any point that you would have liked to settle in one of those countries that you mentioned?
Absolutely. I mean, I was very settled in the UK. I was there for 7 years, right? It was quite a long period of time. But for me personally, Brexit kind of gave me the push to unsettle and look for something different. And then that's when I made the move to Canada and kind of started moving about again.
Super. Marie, how did you enter the global mobility sector? How did you enter this world, right? What is your story, and how or what was exactly the landscape of global mobility at the time you made acquaintance with this sector? Because I'm going to tell you why I'm asking this, because I have a series of interviews with our partners on xpath.global, and many of them tell me that they entered this industry by sheer chance or luck, right? What is your story, and how was everything 10 years ago?
I mean, I can't say mine was a very different experience. It was true sheer luck, or I don't know, course of life, I guess. When I moved to London, I had a series of interviews lined up that I found through different job websites, you know, your normal cv.com type. And I had an interview at NEXUS International Movers for what they called a baggage sales position. At what it's very doesn't sound very glamorous, and it's not. It's essentially what it was, is being a telesales agent selling baggage shipping services. So that was the backpacker, the Australia Kiwi, you know, South African marketplace. And when I was there, I realized that this service is very useful for also companies who are moving their employees, right? And so we started to develop a kind of a corporate service offering. And that was really when I started attending a lot of the, you know, the networking events like Forum for Expatriate Management, for an example, and really getting to understand that there's this whole other industry tied to this backpacker shipping, you know, service that I was involved in, and very quickly saw a lot of potential. But yeah, but what frustrated me was that it was, you know, I'm coming from Estonia, where you can vote online since 2007, I believe. Everything's digital. But the industry that I was found myself in was so slow, right? It was very much spreadsheets, a lot of emails, a lot of telephone conversations. There was no communicating systems. And that's how I kind of started my journey. when I worked at NEXUS International, across the railway tracks, you could see Pickfords. And I used to look at Pickfords as this, it's a 400-year-old moving company brand. It was the kind of creme de la creme of UK movers, as I portrayed them or had this vision of them. Mm-hmm. And so I always said, I want to work there one day. And I ended up working there. And and over there, again, the same thing, they had a large proportion of consumer clients, but they were also working on a lot of the corporate accounts. Some of the biggest ones were things like the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, large programs. And during my time, both at NEXUS International and Pickfords, I also started working with what was back then Move Guides, mm-hmm. which now is Topia. But it was the first company at the time who really started to embrace technology in this industry. So I got a lot of interest in that and wanted to really kind of be involved in making that change. So we built a pretty strong relationship between Pickfords and Move Guides. Mm-hmm. And then at one point, I ended up going to Move Guides and working there as their supply chain manager, managing the EMEA region. And that was an interesting time because as Move Guides was more entering into the market, there was more and more of technology popping up, more and more companies talking about it. There is still, unfortunately, a lot of archaic processes in our industry. And I think Households Good Moving is probably one that has a lot of it on a bigger scale, right? They have embraced technology to a certain extent. You see adaptation of video surveys, for an example.
Mm-hmm. This
but
is what
still,
I want to.
Yeah. But still, they are very much the technology they use on the back end. It's not like your Amazon where you can track your package. They don't scan, they don't have stickers. There are some moving companies who have started to kind of implement things like that, mm-hmm. but it's still at very early days. It's still very slow.
Do you see, Marie, do you see any difference in terms of digitalization adoption? Do you see any difference between the moving side of global mobility and the rest of the services, like destination services or immigration services?
I think destination and immigration have definitely started to speed up the adoption compared to something like moving. I mean, there are aspects of the moving industry too that are adopting the technology, but I don't think it's enough, anywhere near enough at what is being done yet. But there's still hope.
Super. This is roughly this is how the landscape of mobility was like 10 years ago for you, right? Mm-hmm. Did you see any trends, for example, emerging in this past 10 years? Where is the industry now, let's say, compared to where it was a decade ago? I don't know. I'm thinking, for example, on the supplier side, mergers and acquisitions so that they can be more powerful and access a wider range of services together to serve their clients, or I don't know, at corporate level, perhaps a never-ending search for that single point of contact. Everybody's looking for that spot.
Oh yes, the single point of contact. There's so much there. I mean, the industry has changed massively, I think. Obviously, I mentioned the adoption of technology, but there has been a huge amount of consolidation, I think. Mm-hmm. And I think that's been in all parts. You've obviously seen RMCs as well as GM Tech. You look at Polaris and Move Guides becoming Topia, for an example. Topia working with Cardis now, and things like that, server acquiring team. But there's also in the immigration side. So you look at Fragment acquiring immigration technology, for an example. And what that really creates from the traditional relocation side, especially, is consolidation of purchasing power, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what it really does. And that consolidation of purchasing power then hinders the choice of suppliers for the actual customer. Mm-hmm. Because when you're consolidating into these large we call them RMCs, these large relocation management companies, they're the ones who control the supply chain. They're the ones who select the suppliers that you're going to use. They give you some flexibility in terms of bringing in your own suppliers, but they're always going to push their own preferred suppliers, right? And what that's also done for the actual people providing the service, so the DSBs, the household goods companies, the temp accommodation, first of all, it really squeezes the price, right? Because it's becoming a volume game. I'll give you a better price if I give you, X amount of moves a year. And it's also hindering the service as well, because you're going to have this middleman who's doing the communication on your behalf. And you can't always rely that communication, unfortunately, to be accurate. And that's where you're going to have ending up problems. And more than once in my lifetime, I've seen service providers being thrown so-called under the bus, to cover up your own image. And that's really a dangerous ground, because at the end of the day, the DSBs, the house, they're the ones doing the work.
Yeah, they are the experts.
They're the ones actually, exactly.
The local experts and the local specialists, right? But still, Marie, I'm pretty sure there is something there, because you have a lot of corporate clients searching for that single point of contact and that I don't know, value added when they're working with a big global company, right?
I mean, I think it will work for some companies, absolutely. That model will work for some, but that model is not necessarily right for everyone.
What do you mean?
Because when you're working with service providers directly and taking out that middleman, you're going to have more transparency with your service providers. You're going to have much more fluent conversations and communications, which means, and communication is such a key, right? Setting expectations is such a key for both the employee who's actually relocating, as well as HR, who has to manage the budgets. Because if you don't set expectations properly, that's when you're going to have extra costs later, because you're going to patch up something, that the client thought that they were going to receive, and then they're not, and then you're going to have issues there. So really setting the expectations and the communication. And when you're working with the provider directly, that's a lot smoother than having someone, because there's always going to be something lost in he said, she said kind of situations. And when you have a middleman, at the end of the day, you're in that point, because a lot of these organizations, they really restrict your ability to talk to your service provider, even at times of escalations.
The communication is a bit hindered.
Yeah. And it's almost like going down a rabbit hole, right? What do you find there when you start going down there? But it gives you more autonomy and more choice as well, because you're opening up to a whole host of suppliers. Just because someone is the biggest in the country doesn't mean that they're best in the country. Sometimes, the biggest is not always the best. Sometimes a smaller provider can provide a much better service, purely because you're not in a cog in a wheel, right? You get more attention as a customer, as opposed to being a commodity. Because for a lot of these big organizations, it's becoming a commodity.
Marie, in this decade that you have been activating in this industry, have you ever felt that things could have been done in a different manner, perhaps? Was there a particular side of the international assignment management process, for example, that you felt could have been handled otherwise or done otherwise? I don't know, I'm thinking.
I'm going to go. I'm going to go back to the vendor selection and the customer autonomy. I think that's really what. So there's a lot of solutions on the market right now for technology now, which is great, right? You have quite a few relocation management technology providers now, but there's really real restriction and issue in gaining access to quality providers, right? You have local relocation organizations, sure, where you can find agents, but that's a very research heavy, time consuming process. Exactly. So to have the ability to not be tied into one of those, you know, controlling relationship almost, I want to call it, but it might be a bit controversial to say that. But to have that autonomy, there's no real access to that right now. Which is kind of what attracted me to expat as well, right? Because there's the marketplace. And I think it's important to have an open marketplace. I think in any industry where you look at, we talked about being a digital nomad, right? When I go to book a flight, I go on Kayak or Skyscanner, right? I have a marketplace of different airlines, different routes, different pricing, different level of quality of service. Because let's face it, you know, airlines. The same is with when I go to book accommodation. I mean, you can look at something like booking.com, that's a marketplace. When you look at something like Airbnb, that's a marketplace. When I want to buy a train ticket, there's marketplaces for that. I want to find an apartment, it's for everything. And I think it's mind-boggling that we don't have an independent marketplace for relocation services. So when I found out about expat and what you've been working on, it really intrigued me, because I think it would provide that gap in where currently there is a need for, you know, technology, which is the SaaS side of things, the ecosystem to actually manage the cases, but have autonomy over who your providers are, and finding and locating quality, approved, vetted providers. Because I think that's a very time-consuming process. I mean, even from my own perspective, when I was at Move Guys and sourcing for supply chain, I mean, we spent hours researching for suppliers, because when you have to cover, you know, there's 54 countries in Africa, for an example, and you need a supplier of each service line in each country, that's a lot of work, because it's important that you work with accredited companies, because obviously the risk and compliance issue there from the company perspective, if they end up working with someone who is not, you know, actually going to deliver the service they're promising you, then that's an issue. So yeah. so I think it's well overdue to have an open, transparent marketplace for the relocation services of all types. You know, everything from immigration tax, household goods moving, temporary accommodation. There is a little bit of marketplace going on for temporary accommodation now, which is great to see. But the rest of the relocation services, it's very much a who do you know kind of industry right now.
Marie, I'm going to ask you a question based on something that you mentioned a bit earlier. You mentioned that you wanted transparency, right? You as a client, right? You put yourself in the client's shoes, talking about your past experiences, and you said, okay, I wanted transparency, right? When I book a flight, when I book a ticket, when I blah, blah, blah. You want transparency as a client, right? And we believe that clients do want transparency and need transparency. Do you believe that our industry is prepared for transparency? Are we prepared to be transparent?
That's a good question. I think that question is yes and no. I think there are plenty of companies out there who are ready to be transparent. But I think there's also going to be quite a bit of pushback to be transparent, because if you put your pricing out there in the open, that's the price you can charge. You know, there's no such thing as, oh, we'll charge this customer X amount just because it's this customer. But there's a lot of that happening in our industry at the moment. There's the prestige of having a client, you know, charging little fees, little tariffs, because, you know, other companies see they're our client. It's the prestige, and I think will be pushback for sure from some suppliers.
Throughout these past 10 years, working with all kind of companies, what would be, let's say, the main lessons that you have taken with you?
I think the most important lesson is always to keep your integrity. I think no matter what you do, that's the most important thing, because if you have pride and integrity in the work you've done, no matter what the circumstances, you're still going to be able to walk away from it held high, right? And the other thing is, I mean, I'm the one who always talks about technology because it's really frustrating for me to see the slowness of the change in the industry. But you have to adapt to it. I mean, mobility is always evolving, but you have to adapt to the technology, because if you don't, very soon, and it's going to be sooner rather than later, you're not going to have any clients anymore, because it's becoming an expectation that you have solutions. Exactly. Mm-hmm. So I've seen that, you know, where the clients have pushed for technology to be adapted, and it's paid off very well for the supplier. So the companies that are still having that pushback, they need to get on with it, because it's going to affect them in the long run. And I think also the one of the last things I would say is always have to keep learning, because mobility changes all the time, right? And you have to keep learning, because there's so many different parts to it as well. You know, you've got I started in household goods moving, mm-hmm. but there are so many different parts to it. And a regular person on the street, when you say I work in global mobility, they don't know what it is. They have no idea. Yeah. Yeah, and then when you start explaining about it, they become fascinated, because they're like, oh my God, I never knew that existed, yeah. You know, unless they have been an assignee themselves, then they have a little bit of an idea of what goes behind it. But a regular person has no idea. Yeah. And I think there's a lot to learn every day.
Whenever well, anybody was asking me, I was just, after trying to explain, right, what I do, I just gave up, and I was telling them, I'm a consultant. And everybody was happy with that. Oh, consultant, we know consultant, that's fine.
You know? Yeah, I mean, even I remember when I was at GMJ, we had that question in the documentary stuff we were creating, was what is global mobility? And yeah. The answers you get back, even from people who have worked in mobility, you know, for 20 plus years, their answers vary, because it's like what I meant when I said digital nomad can mean many things. The same way global mobility management can mean many things to different people, depending on their journey, their circumstances, which part of it they're in as well. So it's yeah, ever evolving.
Super. And one last question, Marie, because we're heading towards our session's end. What attracted you to be part of our team, right? Part of a startup like ours. What was the thing that thing that made you think that, hey, I'd like to be part of that team?
Absolutely. So obviously, what first sparked my interest was the marketplace. And that's what made me actually reach out to Elena, because
marketplaces are amazing.
I saw that and I was like, this is great. And then when I started talking to her, and when I realized that it's so much more than just a marketplace, you know, you've got the SaaS ecosystem behind it to help manage the cases and really provide value both to the HR as well as the vendors. That really sparked my interest, and that really got me excited to be able to be part of something that different. But when I say different, I mean, there's platforms that manage cases, etc.
Of course.
But what makes it so different is the combination of that marketplace, and then powering that behind it is the SaaS. So that really what attracted me to it.
Super. I really hope we'll be having smooth sailing together, as I said, and I welcome you into our team as well during
Thank you. It's great, and I am excited to have conversations with some of my friends from the mobility world, and also meet some of our current vendors as well, and really build on what you've already created, really.
Super. Thanks a lot, Marie. We'll be answering if there are any questions to our session. We'll be answering them directly in LinkedIn. yeah, under the comments. Thanks a lot for your time, and have a lovely day. And thank you everybody for watching us. Have a lovely day.
Thank you, Madalena, and thanks everyone.
Bye.
Bye.